The rustling of grocery bags was the only sound in the car as Clara Jefferson turned onto Maple Grove Lane, a peaceful suburban street in Columbus, Ohio. Towering oaks lined the sidewalks, their branches arching overhead like a protective canopy. The late afternoon sun filtered through the leaves, splashing golden light onto the neatly kept lawns and two-story homes. Clara, now 72, had driven this route for over 20 years, every turn memorized, every crack in the pavement familiar. Her old silver sedan, though showing its age, moved smoothly down the street. In the passenger seat, bags of groceries shifted as she slowed for a stop sign, their contents clinking softly, a carton of eggs, a loaf of rye bread, a bouquet of daisies she didn't really need but couldn't resist. To Clara, this was routine. Mundane even, but routine had a fragile edge. She noticed it first in the rearview mirror, a black and white police cruiser following a few car lengths behind. Nothing unusual. Not at first. They're probably just patrolling, she told herself. It's a quiet neighborhood. But something deep inside her stirred. A sensation she hadn't felt in a long time, but could never quite shake. The same one she felt decades ago when walking alone down certain streets, or when security guards followed her through department stores. She turned right onto Rosewood Drive. The cruiser mirrored her turn. A chill slid down her spine. Then came the flicker of red and blue lights. Her heart didn't race, not yet. Instead, it slowed, weighed heavy in her chest. Clara's fingers tightened around the steering wheel as she eased the car to the side of the road. Her mind raced through the checklist. I wasn't speeding. I didn't run a stop sign. My tags are current. But it didn't matter. She put the car in park and exhaled deeply, reaching for her purse. Her license and registration were tucked neatly inside, exactly where they should be. But before she could grab them, a sharp knock on the window made her flinch. Clara turned her head. A tall, broad-shouldered officer stood at her door, mirrored sunglasses obscuring his eyes. Another officer lingered behind her car, his hand resting far too comfortably near his holster. License and registration. The first officer barked, his voice clipped and cold. No greeting. No explanation. Clara kept her hands where he could see them and offered a polite smile, though it didn't reach her eyes. Good afternoon, officers. May I ask why I'm being pulled over? The officer shifted his weight. Your car matches the description of a stolen vehicle. Clara blinked, a flicker of disbelief crossing her face. A stolen vehicle? Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled as she retrieved her license and registration. The silver sedan, her faithful car for nearly a decade, now somehow a suspect in a crime. She handed over the documents, her fingers grazing the roughness of the officer's gloves. He snatched them without a word and retreated to the cruiser. The second officer stayed behind. He leaned down, peering into the back seat. His gaze swept over her grocery bags, the bouquet of daisies, the knit scarf she had left folded on the seat. He didn't say a word, but Clara felt the unspoken judgment in the air. What do you see when you look at me? She wondered. A grandmother? Or a threat? She stayed still, both hands gripping the wheel. Years of hard-earned wisdom had taught her the importance of composure. Is there a problem, officer? She asked, her voice steady, almost serene. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he studied her, eyes flicking from her hands to her face, before asking, Where are you coming from? Clara sighed quietly. Not a routine question for a simple traffic stop. The grocery store, she replied. Picking up a few things. You live around here? She nodded. Edo. Where at? Clara's patience thinned. Officer, is this relevant? The tension thickened. The officer squared his shoulders. We're just making sure everything checks out. That phrase again. She had heard it before, phrased like a courtesy, but heavy with suspicion. The first officer returned, still clutching her documents. This car isn't reported stolen, he said, as though disappointed by the result. But we still need to verify a few things. Verify what exactly? She asked. Step out of the vehicle, ma'am. The second officer shifted, his hand now hovering close to his holster. This is how it starts. Clara's pulse slowed, her brain calculating every possible next move. She had seen enough of these stories. Some ended with an apology, some with a funeral. She wasn't going to gamble. Is there a reason I need to exit my car? Her tone was cool, edged with dignity. The first officer's jaw clenched. We're asking you nicely. Don't make this harder. Clara inhaled deeply, a lifetime of composure pushing her forward. She unlatched the door and stepped out. The air felt thicker outside. The second officer tensed as though expecting sudden violence from a 72-year-old grandmother now standing before him. Do you have any weapons on you? The first officer asked. Clara tilted her head. She wore a simple blue cardigan over a floral blouse, khaki pants, and old sneakers. She looked, in every way, like someone's mother. Someone's grandmother. I don't, she replied. Mind if we check the trunk? He pressed. There it was. Do you have probable cause? She asked, her patience fraying. The officers stiffened. They hadn't expected that. Clara didn't give them time to respond. Instead, she pulled out her phone, her fingers moving with slow, deliberate precision. She scrolled through her contacts and tapped a name. The phone rang once. Twice. Then, hey, Mom. Everything all right? Her heart swelled at the familiar voice. Bubby. I'm fine, but these officers here seem to think I'm driving a stolen car. There was a beat of silence. Put me on speaker, her son ordered. She did. This is U.S. Attorney General Marcus Jefferson, his voice cut like steel. Who am I speaking to? The effect was instant. The officers froze. The first one, Officer Daniels, stumbled over his words. Officer Daniels, Columbus PD. And why, Officer Daniels, are you detaining my mother? Marcus's voice was razor sharp. We were following protocol, sir. Protocol? Marcus snapped. You forced a 72-year-old woman out of her car and attempted to search her vehicle without cause. Neither officer could respond. I want badge numbers. Now. Daniels fumbled with his notepad, scribbled it down, and handed it to Clara. The second officer followed, his hands visibly shaking. You'll be hearing from Internal Affairs, Marcus promised. And trust me, this won't go unnoticed. The line clicked off. Clara tucked the paper into her purse, her movements slow, deliberate. She faced the officers one last time. Am I free to go now? Neither officer could meet her gaze. Yes, ma'am. She got back in her car, pulled away from the curb, and drove home in silence. But the silence inside her wasn't calm. It was heavy, because the real issue wasn't who her son was, it was that she had to make that call at all.